Welcome to the Bourbon and Brands podcast, where we have simple conversations with successful people over a glass of our favorite brown spirit, bourbon. Well, what's up, Jerah? How you doing?
Man, I got no complaints today.
No
it's
complaints.
Been a good day.
That's always a good day, and complaining doesn't really help that much anyways.
No.
And if there we're drinking whiskey today. So, I mean, that gets rid of all the complaints right there in itself.
Yeah, it would 86 all of them. So.
Yeah. So we've got the Widow Jane lineup. You took a look through my collection list.
I did.
And that was kind of one that jumped out to you, said, hey, I've been wanting to try it. So here we got it. We've got 3 of their offerings, the 10-year, the 13, and then the Widow Jane Decadence, which is, to me, delicious. All of them are, really. Big fan of what Widow Jane's doing. They're pretty new. I mean, they haven't been around a long time. They're up in Brooklyn, out of Brooklyn, New York. They're kind of known for the water they source, which is where the Widow Jane name comes from. It's a limestone water mine, called Rosendale, I think, or Rosedale. Let me see. Rosendale Mines. And so limestone water is kind of a, kind of how Kentucky gets its name for making the greatest bourbon, because they got those water tables there. But long story short, Widow Jane kind of named after that mine where they get their water. And so really good stuff. Now, I will say that they don't technically make any of these whiskeys there. These are all purchased from producers. Like on the back of this, for example, it says Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana bourbon bottled by Widow Jane Distillery. So Indiana is probably MGPI, because it's one of the largest manufacturers of whiskey there. A lot of people use that MGPI juice, so they buy the barrels from them. They put those barrels in, and they say they use no more than 5 barrels in their small batch. So a barrel from MGPI or 2. The Tennessee is probably Dickel. I'd probably bet 9 times out of 10 that if it comes from Tennessee, as far as like a contributor that they're outsourcing from, it'd be Dickel. And then Kentucky, which who knows who that one is. But they take those 3 really good bourbons, put them in a small batch, and that's what each one of these are.
Interesting.
And this one's been aged. This is 10-year juice, which is great. 13-year juice, which is awesome. And then this one, they take those same barrels of whiskey, bourbon, and age them a little longer in a maple syrup barrel. So that's where that sweetness comes from, the decadence, which we'll dive into.
Yeah, and I haven't had that one. I'm on the 10-year, which I've had before.
Yeah.
And I've had the 15-year.
Okay, I saw the 15-year today actually in the store. I don't know why I didn't.
I had a bottle of that for a while. Yeah. I picked it up last year when I was in Boca Raton for my birthday. Okay. I found it at a random. Yeah. Yeah, getting it home was kind of crazy. Yeah. So I had that one, drank it in a year, and then so I haven't had the 13 and I haven't had the Decadence. Yeah, the Decadence is to me kind of a little sweet for me in my palate. It's definitely what I consider like a dessert type flavor for me. Almost like Angels Envy Rye.
Yeah, like I'll have some of that like after dinner, and it's like a dessert. So it's really good stuff. So good choice. I'm glad you asked for the Widow Jane, because here it is. And so we'll be sipping on this, but let's get to know you a little bit. You are, I don't know, do you like the title, The Most Dangerous Woman in Texas? Or do you prefer to leave that for somebody else and just kind of fly under the radar with your dangerousness?
I think that, it's already out there. It's already out there.
Dangerous in more ways than one.
Yeah.
So you're known for the Clearing the Chamber, which is your training program, right? Mm-hmm. And it's really for anyone, right?
It is. It started out heavily marketed toward women.
Right.
When I started it, I've been teaching for 12 years. I started that brand probably 7 years ago, and it was primarily marketed toward women. But the more women that you train, these are moms, they're married. Mm-hmm. A lot of their husbands had found me online and referred their wives to me. So now it's almost like a 70-30, right? Yeah. So I have probably about 30% of my clientele is men, but most of those men are connected somehow to, my female clientele. And most of the time it's their spouses or fathers or brothers, that maybe had originally wanted them to come and train with me. And then, what I love getting, the feedback that I love getting from that is, when the wives or the daughters come home and they're talking about what they learned, and then it kind of sparks an interest in the husband or dad or brother to go, well, I didn't really know that. Because there's a lot of men who grew up around guns but never had any formal training. Right. And it's different. It really is. Yeah. And self-defense shooting is different than hunting. Right. Absolutely. And you have to kind of know the difference. So yeah, it did start out primarily marketed toward women, but yeah, it's a program for everyone.
Because you also have WADE, right? Is it called WADE for women?
I do.
Or something like that?
Yes.
So what is that?
That's my nonprofit.
Okay.
So our 501c3 is pending. So a lot of that got held
new,
up
right?
in the COVID stuff.
Yeah.
But it was a really inspiring story. I was tagged in a Facebook post in a mom's group by some of my former students. And the post was by a woman who found out that her husband was molesting their daughter. And it was her daughter from a previous marriage. Let me clarify that. Okay. Not that it matters, right. But still, the devil's in the details, right?
Right, yeah.
And she was from Egypt and was basically sold by her family into an arranged marriage. That marriage did not last because her husband fell in love with someone else, divorced her, but they had children together, and then she got remarried. And her second husband was molesting one of the daughters from the first marriage. And so she had him called the police, had him removed from home. She did everything right. But he was threatening her, and she got a very painful lesson in our judicial system, which is no one goes to jail based on your word. You have to create a case against someone, and that requires time. And if they can get out on bail, which they do a lot, they can come and get you. Right. And paper isn't going to help you.
Right. Yeah.
So you can file for the restraining order. You can do all that. Fine. Do the process, right? That gives you a paper trail and evidence to show, the effort that you've made to get this done. But at the end of the day, when they come to your house to try to kill you, you got to be able to kill them back. Right. And she figured that out really quick.
Wow.
And so
he came to the house, huh?
No. He was in jail. So she had called the police. Her daughter made a statement. But they can only hold him for so long. So he was going to be able to bail out of jail. Well, in that time, he was contacting her from jail, telling her that he was going to hurt her, kill her. And so she had posted in this mom's group, hey, I went and bought a gun, but I don't know how to use it. This is why I bought the gun. Can someone teach me?
Wow.
And I thought it was brave to do that in a group of women. You don't know everyone in that group.
Yeah.
And it's kind of exposing a big life detail, but I thought it was brave. And so there were many women in that mom's group that I had trained in the past, and they all kind of tagged me. I probably got 19 tags on that post. And so she posted it on a Saturday. I called her on a Sunday. She was at the range on a Monday. And I helped her, now her husband controlled all the finances. We find this a lot in abuse situations and in domestic violence situations where if it's the woman that's being abused, the male is usually in control of the finances, and there's not any resources for her to fall back on. And there weren't in this case either. So she spent all the money that she had in her particular account on this gun. And so I bought her a holster for it. I bought her a case for it. She needed a safe. I mean, she had kids, so she needed to be able to secure it away from the kids. And so I bought all of those things for her, and it got me to thinking, how many other women don't have resources but want to get out?
Right.
And that's a big reason why they don't get out, is because they have no way to create resources for themselves. So I founded WADE for that particular purpose. And we work with other nonprofits who do things like help these women get jobs, wardrobes for job interviews, shelters, affordable housing. We work with all of them to get that done. But then once that's done, the reason that a lot of these women go back is because they don't feel safe. They don't feel like they can protect themselves. And there's a very odd sort of psychological hold that these people have over them. And it's because they don't have the confidence to go, I can protect myself and I can protect my children and I can be independent and I can do this on my own. And once you gift them that confidence, once you show them that it can be done, then it's a whole different ballgame. And so since we don't take on an incredible number of people, because I'm kind of a one woman show here. But in the last year, we've taken 18 women, who have emancipated themselves out of their relationships, and not one of them has gone back.
Wow.
Not one.
That's awesome. I mean, for being like you said, a one woman show, that's pretty incredible. I mean, 18 lives essentially could have been saved there, if they were in really tough relationships and places that they may not have ever gotten out of. And so what do you think the steps are? There's a lot of damage, of course, right, in those relationships, coming out of those relationships. But, and then giving them the training is one thing, but it sounds to me like what you're giving them is courage, along the way. They've already taken a step of courage, obviously, to reach out, but you're helping to build upon that courage, right? As far as not only does it take it to leave what you've had, but also it's going to take it to continue to fight for that freedom that you're fighting for.
Yeah, I mean, their independence has just been covered up and hidden away from them, and they didn't know or understand what a life was outside of that man. Right, yeah. Right? And when there's children involved, it's even harder because she's in her mind thinking, how am I going to feed my kids? Yeah. How am I going to protect my kids? What kind of quality of life are my kids going to have? There's a really stifling, paralyzing fear that comes, and then you have to choose between getting your ass whooped every day or stepping out and being a failure as a mom. It's a nearly impossible choice.
It almost sounds like a no-win.
And then you can go to the shelter. And you can interview and you can get a job, but who's going to watch your kids? Who's going to, I can take self-defense training, but I can't afford it. And who's going to watch my kids while I do it? So we partner with different people. I've got this really great lady that does childcare for me. She's wonderful. And it's, that's the thing is we have to help these women with their time management, right, until they can get on their feet. But you have to hold them accountable to get on their feet and be able to make these arrangements for themselves going forward. I'm going to do it for you now, and I'm going to show you how to do it. But now you've got to do it going forward. Right.
And so where did all this passion come from for you as far as where were you in life where you thought, hey, this is something that this is something that I'm interested in, a passion of mine. This is not only something that I can let terminate on me, but this is something else I can pass along to other women. What was that point in your life? What did it look like?
Well, I was raped when I was a teenager, and that will it will make you or break you. In to use a completely cliche term, and there are people who will take this path of continued victimhood, which is very unattractive, which is not productive, which is stifling, and you will gain nothing from it. Now, there are other people who will go down this path of healing, which is so hard because you have to kind of relive that pain in order to heal from it. But to heal and to walk down this path of how do I keep this from happening to someone else, because I know what it feels like. And I chose path one first. Okay.
The victim path.
Yes. And it was it was the rest of I was violent in high school, angry in high school. And then in my early 20s, it just turned into making every man that came across my path pay, for what happened to me, cutting people that never made me bleed. Right. And I think that there was just a time in my sort of later 20s where, you go, man, I'm going to either be alone for the rest of my life if I keep doing this, or I've got to kind of face the fact that this thing happened to me, but I'm responsible for my healing. Like, no one's going to save me. It's a lot like self-defense, which we'll get into in a minute. No one's coming to save me. I've got to figure this out on my own. I have to seek healing on my own, and I have to quit making people pay for something they never did to me. Yeah. So when I decided to do that, it became imperative that, and that ended up being my purpose, was how do I get other women to not go down that path, number one, but also how do I help them prevent it from happening at all? Right. Yeah. And that's really it's two horns on the same goat, right? I can't prevent every rape. Okay. But I can prevent some. Right. And that's good. And so you kind of have to have it in, I can only do what I can do. But I need to do something. And that was kind of where it came into play.
And that was like your mid-20s, somewhere in there?
Yeah. I started I grew up around guns, so I was very comfortable around guns, but it was a long gun situation for me. So shotguns and rifles was what I was most proficient with because we were a hunting family. And I did a lot of competition shotgun when I was in high school. So the handgun game was a little foreign to me. So I started taking some lessons. I had a stalker in my early 20s too, which was kind of a scary situation. And so I never worried about it when I was at home because I've had a shotgun in my house since I've lived alone. Yeah. And I never worried about that. But I started to think to myself, what would I do if I wasn't at home and this person found me in a parking lot at the grocery store? I mean, I would have nothing. Right. And the first thing they teach you, especially in hands-on self-defense, is you got to fight. It's going to be the dirtiest, most violent fight of your life because you don't want them to take you from the first crime scene to the second crime scene. Right. So the first crime scene is where they kidnap you. And the second crime scene is when they rape and kill you or sell you into a sex trafficking ring in Haiti. Right. Yeah. So, I started taking handgun lessons. It was a difficult process because I was a chick learning from dudes that didn't really want to teach me, and that was a time when, there weren't a lot of female trainers. There still aren't. But there are more now than there were then. And so the process of me as a female learning something that was very male oriented, I just kind of had to swallow it and take it and just go because I wasn't going to find anybody that was going to make it more comfortable for me. I was just going to have to power through. Yeah. But that experience led me to go, there's a way that women learn this and it's a little bit different from the way that men learn it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask is the training, like if you're going to train me and you're going to train my wife, would the training look different?
Kind of.
Because I would assume there'd be some differences that you would have to.
I wouldn't say drastically different. Not even gear wise. There's a lot of women that think that they have to get this certain kind of gear because, we're chicks and you're dudes. There's a lot of gear that's been out on the market for years and years and years that women can use. They just never really knew it. Right. Or it wasn't the color they wanted. Well, now people have started to kind of figure out, from a marketing perspective, what women want. So the colored guns and the colored holsters and everything, whatever, if that's what you want, do it as long as you carry it all the time, So but the training in and of itself doesn't necessarily look different, but what women need to understand and what male instructors need to understand too is, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, is, the different places that women may carry than men, right? Based on what they're wearing. Cause we dress drastically different than you.
Hopefully.
So I would drink to that.
Okay. So, yeah, that's what I was thinking is like, as far as, the way you carry would be differences, and maybe some of the scenarios, the situational awarenesses that you would have as opposed to men might be a little different depending.
It will be. It is different because men are typically can be looked at as a natural deterrent. I mean, there's not a lot of men that just get randomly attacked
or kidnapped
or whatever. But another thing that is a little bit different is, a lot of men can get away with like half-assing a grip and still hit their mark. Whereas grip is very important for women because our hands and wrists are much smaller. And so when you talk about that in terms of recoil, sealing that energy into the gun and really having a good grip on it is really imperative for women. Whereas a lot of men, because their hands are more muscular and meaty and bigger, they can get away with, half-assing a grip and still get it done. So it's not drastically different, no.
I mean, I'm just trying to, after this podcast, you said you had a stalker at one point in your life. And after this, I'm sure there's no man ever going to try to stalk you again. And just because
it would be a large mistake. It would be
because I'm setting the over under on weapons that you have on your persons right now at like 4.5. Okay. I'm worried about, saying something in the wrong way right now because I don't want to be, put in my place by you. But I can imagine that over those years, there's still obviously a healthy fear of just the world we live in and a situational awareness wherever you go. But the difference that I learned from just taking the simple courses that I've taken, the self-defense courses and firearms training and things that I've been a part of, you walk in public a little differently in a sense of not that you're like, man, I just hope somebody tries to cross me. That's not it at all. But it's just more of an assurance that you have, but also you just are looking at things differently. You're looking at things in a different, like when I go to a restaurant, and I choose my seat, and I handle a restaurant experience differently than I did 10 years ago. Yeah. And same thing with movie theaters or malls or wherever. And even the way that I sit in my car in a parking lot, is just different now than I used to. And so all those things, that's the benefit to me of the training, not just knowing what to do in the situation when it goes bad, but having that calm assurance in life. You just feel a freedom. You feel like an ease of like, I don't really know what might come, but when it comes, I feel a lot more prepared for it than I would have before.
Yeah. And when I put together the program, you're absolutely right. I didn't want it to just be about physical defense. Situational awareness is the biggest, most valuable tool that you have. And you couple it with a weapon when you can't get away,
right?
And obviously if you can flee, get out, but sometimes you can't. And so putting together that program and putting women especially on a good pathway to training was really important to me because I've put in the 10,000 hours to become a subject matter expert in these things. And if we look at the totality of circumstances, we don't just need to know about situational awareness and physical defense. We need to understand what happens to us legally if we take this kind of action. And once you have those three major components, right? Your legal education, your physical education, and your mental education, it's much easier for you to make a decision in the moment and understand what your options are after. And that results in less panic, more action, which is what you want. And I think that the Second Amendment community and the instructor community do people a huge disservice by not emphasizing all three of those aspects of it and allowing or really just not encouraging people to go through this as an academy. Right. So women will come to instructors and say, I just need you to teach me how to use my gun. Well, that's not enough. Right. So one introduction to handgun class does not equal you being capable of wielding a gun in any situation. This is an ongoing perishable skill, and it has to be treated as such. And so, that's what when women come to me, I'm like, just understand that if you want me to go through this journey with you, you're going to be held accountable. And I'm going to be on you to continue this education and to carve out time in your calendar, because, we make time for so much trivial shit. We really do. I mean, it's financially and from a time management perspective. I mean, the things that we spend money on and the ways that we spend our time has just, the more that I get into this, the more it just troubles me. And we really could use, 3 hours a month. I mean, give yourself 3 hours a month for this education. Go to the gun range twice a month, take a new class, read a new article, research a new holster or a new gun. Make yourself aware of this. Critique things that you see in current events and social media when you read about people who had to shoot someone in self-defense, or read that article and go point out what they did right and point out what they did wrong, so that you understand the mistakes not to make in the future. Because we're not having these conversations with our family and friends the way that we should, because we're afraid to offend people. But at the end of the day, I don't really want to hang out a lot with people who don't look at guns as a really positive tool. Right. And if you're, if I'm hanging out with somebody and they're like, ugh, guns, it's, don't get me wrong. You get your choice. And I'm friends with plenty of people that don't like guns, but I also don't consider them great ambassadors for their safety either.
And though, if you've got 10 buddies that don't like guns and they're very anti-gun, those aren't the 10 people you want to go hang out at the mall with during an active shooting situation either. Because it's just like, dang, you're not much help. You're not much help. Why don't you just go hide under that fake tree over there? No, I love the idea of that, because especially in the culture we live in, it is the harsh reality is that you are the first responder in these situations. Okay. You can call the police all you want. You can call an ambulance, you can call 911, but they're going to be the second responder. You're the first responder. When someone comes in your house, or somebody approaches you, or someone grabs you and you call 911, they're the second person on the scene if you're lucky.
That's exactly right. And I pointed that out. I testified before our House legislature on this in 2018. And I told them how, how disappointed I was in their horrendous lack of gun knowledge. Even those that ran on a 2A platform didn't know anything about guns, didn't practice, didn't go to the range, couldn't tell you how it works. And that was disappointing. But the second thing that I pointed out was that, physics, science, if we're going to follow the science, and that's what we're all about right now, is following the science.
Got to, yeah. Science doesn't lie.
And physics dictates that the only people who are going to be able to purposefully respond to a situation of duress are the people that are already there. And so we have to empower and educate the civilian gun owners so that they make good decisions, so that they can understand, a threat versus a non-threat a little bit better, and so that they understand the legal ramifications of what they're doing, so that it will, so that it can prohibit people to not shoot people that don't need to be shot. Right. And so that really needs to be kind of shouted from the rooftops, especially in political realms, because they're not encouraging citizens of their districts to go and gain for themselves this knowledge.
I mean, and that's another thing that I see the benefit of true extensive ongoing training is that you begin to learn. And the more you know, and the more you learn, the more comfortable you are with firearms, and learning those situational awareness moments as they come in training, is you become better at making the decision. Is this a moment where I need to pull a firearm, or is this a moment where I need to pull a trigger? Because even those two situations can be different, right? And then you go on from there, because I think that a lot of people think, when they're on the outside looking in, of, oh, okay, so this side is about I need to get a gun and I need to protect myself with it. And so when someone does something wrong to me, I need to point the gun at them and shoot them. And then this side's over here saying, no, that's not the case. The gun is there as the last resort if your life depends on it or your loved one's lives depend on it. At least that's my perspective. What's yours on that?
Well, I think that there's a difference that really needs to be discussed more, needs to be educated more, because just because you pull a gun doesn't mean that you have to pull the trigger.
Right.
But when you pull the gun, you better be prepared.
Be ready to
pull the trigger. Like you don't pull it without that being like a big option for you. Mm-hmm. And that's just guns 101, right? So we're not just pulling the gun out to scare people.
Right.
But this whole idea that talking about self-defense in terms of ending lives has become faux pas. Mm-hmm. And it's sad. We don't talk about workplace violence anymore, mm-hmm. Where people should be able to have guns at work.
Teachers,
I think in most career fields, you should be able to have a gun or a self-defense tool at work.
Right.
And they don't want to talk about that. People don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
And we don't want to, I get attacked in a lot of moms' Facebook groups a lot because, mm-hmm. I'll say things and it's very reality. I mean, one time this lady posted in a mom's group that, she was like, post your most unpopular opinion. Well, I'd had a couple of these, here. And a lot of people were like, I like pineapple on pizza or, Team Jacob. From Twilight. I mean, most of them were really funny, mm-hmm. but I saw an opportunity.
Yes. I cannot wait. I'm so excited to hear what you said.
And I said, I think that if you bring a life into this world and you don't get a self-defense education, you're lazy.
Okay.
And what you do with is, I'm a single chick with no kids.
Right.
And so, and I'm probably single because I have a lot of these kinds of opinions, if we're honest with each other, Oh
man, I think. Okay, go ahead.
But if I am physically prepared mm-hmm. to bring a child into this world, and I am confident in my ability to protect that child.
Right. Yeah.
I've put the hours in.
Makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean that I would be guaranteed to win in any scenario.
Right.
But what it does mean is that I feel like more often than not, whatever's coming at me, mm-hmm. I'm going to be able to handle it.
Right.
I don't think that there are a lot of moms in this country that can say that. And I feel like that's a problem.
Yeah.
And so, boy, did I get attacked.
Did you get kicked out?
I didn't get kicked out.
Okay.
But I did get attacked a lot. And, it's this mentality of how dare you say that to me?
Yeah.
How dare you tell me that I'm unprepared? How dare you, tell me how to protect my kids? Hey, look, you have every right to tell me that. Mm-hmm. I can't be mad at you.
Right.
But I promise you that if your kid gets kidnapped at the mall, the first thing that you're going to think about is, why didn't I know how to do this?
Right.
Or why, if I would have only had a gun, if I would have only had a knife.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It happened in Fort Worth when the young girl got kidnapped walking down the street with her mom at 6:30 in the afternoon. It was broad daylight.
Yeah.
The car pulls up. This was national news 4 blocks away from my house at the time. And the car pulls up. The guy doesn't say anything. The guy doesn't even try to lure him into the car. He literally just gets out of the car. The mom and the daughter, she's 8 years old, are walking down the street in their neighborhood, nice afternoon walk. And the guy walks up and just literally snatches this child out of her mother's hands, mm-hmm. throws her in the car. The mom jumps in the passenger seat and starts hitting him, right?
Mm-hmm. That's effective.
How good is that going to, how's that? That's like me saying, hey, you want to go fisticuffs right now? Who do you think is going to win? Not me. Okay. If it's a fair fight.
Yeah.
Right. Because I'm going to pull my gun out and shoot you.
Right.
But if I didn't have that.
I'm never going fisticuffs with you, by the way.
But do you see what I'm saying? Like it was silly.
That's.
And so now what we have to do is we have to be very careful and not blame this mother, because that's not effective either.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But she did what she could do, but what she did wasn't effective. Mm-hmm. And so she didn't have a force multiplier at her disposal to change the game.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, the question is there something else you could have had that could have been more effective? Right. Is there some sort of tool you could have access to that could have been more effective? And it doesn't mean I'm going to shoot this guy either. That's the other thing is like, hey, the answer is not, hey, you jump in the car and try to punch him to death or you shoot him. It's like even her, and you can tell if someone's been trained, right? Like if I'm a bad guy and I'm a gangster and I'm going to roll up on you and I'm going to try to take your kid. Okay. If you're fumbling around in your purse and you pull out a gun and you hold it out like this, and I'm not, but if you're like, you have the proper maneuvers to where it's like, dang, this person, I'm not joking around. Here's your kid back. It's like, you can tell when somebody's been at a range before. You can tell when someone's had some training.
Oh yeah.
And even just the training alone to be able to produce those mannerisms and the type of persona in itself, it's not like coming down to, do I need to pull a trigger or not? Like you said, when you pull it out, you better be ready to. But it's like, just that assurance of no matter where I'm at, I know that I can, 9 times out of 10, I could deter someone from doing something that would harm me or my family.
Exactly. And even just having pepper spray would have been, I think, a difference maker there because especially given the fact that he threw the child in the back seat, she was able to get in the passenger seat. If she could have pulled that pepper spray out and just got him in the eyeballs with it and made it, he couldn't see, he couldn't drive away. She could have got her daughter out of there. Once again, not blaming her. Right. Because that's a horrific thing to happen to anyone. But, women really need to start thinking about the statistics here. And while I explain this to you, I'm going to have you pour me some of that 13 year. I'm going to do the 13.
13 first? Okay, save this for dessert?
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
I think so. And we have to think about this. And you and I talked a little bit about it yesterday when we were kind of doing some pre-show stuff, but women don't often think about this in terms of them being the biggest soft target out there. Mm-hmm. And then you complicate that with, you pair it with a child who has no way to defend themselves. Right. And it becomes even more burdensome. Mm-hmm. And so in Texas, when we had license to carry, now we're a constitutional carry state, but when we had license to carry, the data showed that less than 5% of the Texas population even had one. Right. Okay.
Which is amazing to me for it being called the state of Texas.
Right. But over 50% of the Texas population owns at least one firearm. Right. So what that really proved to us was that the license to carry program just wasn't effective because Texans don't really like to pay a silly tax to be able to do something that's in the Constitution. Right. To me, that's what it says. Yeah. Okay.
And to me, it also they were carrying the gun regardless anyway.
Right. And some people were carrying illegally, but some people were just leaving it in the car. Mm-hmm. Which is also ineffective unless you're in the car. Right. I mean, it does. What are you going to do? Like when you're in the mall and it's getting shot up and your gun's 200 yards away in the parking lot, it doesn't make sense. So. But when polled, we discovered that only about 2.4% of the just shy of 5% carried every day. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, of the 2.4% of the Texas population that carries every day, how many of those do you think are women?
Oh, gosh. 0.2%.
Right. Next to nothing. We don't know. We don't know the figure. Okay. But so what we have here, if we lay it out, we have a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of people who carry guns every day that are women. Mm-hmm. And yet women are the softest target. A lot of women are moms who are burdened with physical protection of the children, probably more than the father. In most households, women spend more time with the children than the men do.
And I would add in public.
Okay, in public.
I would add in public. Yes, there because most of the time when a woman who is a mother is out in public, 9 times out of 10, that's going to be with their children, or at least one of their child with them. So not only are they needing to think about how do I protect myself, but how do I protect this person that I brought in the world?
Bingo. And so this is why, diving into this and getting this education and spending as much time as I have behind a pistol, it blows my mind that this isn't a more prevalent skill that moms have. So I have a girlfriend that was getting engaged. This was probably like 5 or 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. And, she and I were sitting around having wine, and she said, I got this book and I'm going to show it to Eric whenever, because we just got engaged or whatever. And mm-hmm. she's like, so it's 101 questions you ask when you get engaged. I was like, let me see that book. And I flew through the book and I'm like, there's some pretty good questions in there, but I was like, this needs to be like 110 questions. Mm-hmm. And she's like, what are you talking about? I was like, there's not even a section on self-defense in here. Like, nobody, do you mean to tell me that you're going to marry this guy and you're going to ask him all these questions, but you're not going to talk about, how are we going to raise our kids in a self-defense perspective? Right. Are we going to have guns in the house? Like, people need to talk about this before they get married, because bada bing, bada boom, you wake up the next morning, you got a 3-year-old, and now all of a sudden somebody, usually the dad, is like, hey, we probably need to get a gun for self-defense because now we got a kid to take care of. And the mom's like, no, we don't want guns in the house because the kid could get into it and shoot themselves and all this. It's not they're not having these discussions.
Right.
And then when they get to the point where they're having the discussion, they're already married, the kid's already here, and now they're going to argue about it, and it's going to become a problem in their marriage, and people are on the brink of divorce because of it. It's ridiculous. Yeah. You just talk about it ahead of time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely, my wife and I both carry, and she works in the school system, which brings me back to what you were saying. Like, I love the idea of everyone, like the majority of workplaces allowing their employees to carry. And especially to me in the school system, I think that should be allowed. Like, it almost like encouraged, right? The more people you could have on a school campus who are well trained, who understand how to use a firearm, and who have it on them at that time, the better, the safer that your college school campus is, right? I mean, if you look at the shootings over the last decade, I mean, most of them, I mean, as far as mass shootings, have been on a school campus, right? And so it's one of those things that if we could, and I know there's some schools that have done that, some school systems. I don't know if they're in Texas or not.
Oh, they are. Actually, Argyle ISD pioneered this.
Really? Is it school district based? Like, it's up to them? It's not more of a governor thing?
So the school boards are really the ones that have the power to get this done.
Okay.
And the Argyle ISD school board voted on this years ago, and they actually brought in a police officer, like a chief, to come and run the whole program.
And that's awesome.
My alma mater high school, which is Lone Oak ISD, reached out to me, I believe in 2018 or early 2019 maybe, and asked me to come and present the benefits of this to the school board. And it was really a very cool thing to be a part of, because, seeing the people that I went to high school with now running the high school that I went to school at, and making and pioneering these decisions, I was really proud of it. I was super proud of it. And so I did not do the training because the state of Texas has like a school resource officer training that I'm not certified to teach. I haven't taken the class yet. But I didn't do the training, but I really felt like I was a part of it, because I got to go in front of the school board, in front of parents, where I'm from, and like tell them the benefits of having armed teachers in school. Yeah. And they did it.
Yeah.
And it was awesome.
What did you say? Like, what were some of those give me one or two of those benefits of, like, in your mind, to having a teacher and staff admin at a school campus that have that training, proper training, and firearms?
The biggest one is, I've actually already said, because, physics dictates that the people who are going to respond are the people who are there. And the people who are there, who are going to be the most responsible and most willing to act, are going to be the teachers. I mean, you have to think about, as a parent, what you are truly asking of a teacher when you relinquish the custody and safety of your children to them 8 hours a day, 9 months out of the year. And I think that we forget that they are at risk too of active shooters. And so we're effectively putting teachers' lives on the line. It's not just our children,
right,
but teachers. And if the teacher is willing to risk their lives for your children, which most of them are, and if they're willing to go through the training, which some of them are, I think that you just got to let them. And it's no different than you being a parent and having guns in your house when your children are home. A lot of parents have guns at home, and a lot of parents aren't trained. So what's the difference between having a gun in the hands of a trained teacher than you having guns at home not being trained?
Right. Yeah, that's a good argument.
You know, and so that was one of the arguments that I put out there. You know, another thing that I said is, you know, you can couple this with like technology is really on the side of the schools now to protect the kids. It's just you have to spend the money, right? There has to be, you know, a fund for it. So I was on a 2A panel on a major news network a few years ago, and I was on the panel with an ATF agent, a former ATF agent, a president of a teachers union, and a young student, probably 16 or 17 years old, that had staged a gun violence walkout at his high school. And I was like, there's so much technology. There's these really great door stops that you put on the bottom of the really heavy doors that go into that foundation of the building, and it's almost impossible for you to get that door open, for you to even force open that door. That's a safety technology that can be implemented, you know, that isn't gun based. Okay. And actually, I think that they had that technology in the high school up in, I think, Michigan, that had the active shooter not too long ago. And I think that technology really helped save a lot of students. And so I said, you know, there's no, you know, a lot of these schools don't have metal detectors or school resource officers or any of that stuff. And she said to me, well, the president of the teachers union, she said, well, you know, that costs money and we can't afford it. I was like, well, maybe if you quit spending $10 million on football stadiums, Allen High School, then maybe you'd have a budget for a $50,000 a year resource officer.
Right.
And some $5,000 metal detectors. I mean, this is not difficult. This is a budget thing, and you're spending money on the wrong shit. Yeah.
And that's what my wife used to work for Mansfield ISD. And I remember 3 years ago, 2 or 3, I can't remember. But it was right after they had a big scare. I don't remember what it was. It was something about a school shooting. And they put out like, hey, next year in 20, whatever it was, we approved, it was $1 million where they're going to have an armed officer at every location, every campus on the school district. And it was like, okay, so $1 million. Do you know how well you could train all of these teachers and staff for half of that, you know?
Yeah, you could have 10 instead of 1.
Right. And you could, if you offered training free for every single employee that's going to be on a campus, and you paid for it, then you would spend half of $1 million and you would have 30 well-trained armed carried people at every campus instead of 1. And it's just, I don't know. It makes no sense to me, but hopefully that's where we're headed. But speaking of that, what is on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you think it's going to be that the whole gun law thing, right, to where one day it's going to be nearly, if not impossible, for the average U.S. citizen to acquire a firearm?
Well, I think I think it's a long time away, because I know that it doesn't seem that way right now because the gun issue is very prevalent in political talks, and there's a lot of politicians that are trying to go after that particular right of ours.
Right.
But I think it's a very uphill battle for them. It's been an uphill battle. But one thing that they have done and that they have been successful at is sort of chipping away at it a little bit at a time. And Texas has gotten a lot of that back in the last legislature. So I've paid probably the heaviest attention I've ever paid to the inner workings of our legislature over the last 3 terms. So that's 6 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And I've seen the evolution of that. So now we've actually made a lot of progress in Texas on getting a lot of our freedoms back. So there's no such thing as an illegal knife anymore in Texas for adults.
Oh, really?
No. So like butterfly knives, switchblades, they're all illegal now. Brass knuckles are legal again. Your girl's got 4 pairs. No. Right. I mean, the next day I was out buying.
Do they have rhinestones on them and everything?
Like, I don't do rhinestones, man. Like, I'm not a rhinestone chick.
I just think that would add to insult. Like, if you punch
now you're talking though.
If you punch some dude in the face with not only brass knucks but with rhinestones on them, it's like that guy just got embarrassed far above and beyond what he would have been embarrassed by just by getting punched by just brass knuckles. So continue your story.
You're right. Maybe I should rethink my stance on that.
I think you should just add a couple things on there. And that way you just knock him out. You leave the rhinestone brass knuckles on his forehead and then you just walk away. So that way, and probably snap a few pictures on your way. But that way everyone knows that he just got knocked out.
He just got owned by some rhinestones.
Yes. Owned by rhinestones. Hashtag owned by rhinestones.
There you go. We've started a whole new brand.
Okay. That sounds like a women's self-defense class in itself.
Or just come out with my own line of sparkly brass knuckles owned by rhinestones. I mean, I think you just gave me a new business idea here.
I think I'm going to need a little bit of cut on that because that was technically my idea.
It really was.
And we could call them the Widow Janes. I mean, something, because it's kind of tie it all together in some way.
I love that.
I just think it makes sense. But
the Widow Jane, I love it.
Because, you might be a widow after I punch you in the face with this.
You certainly could. So I saw the evolution of that. And that was all in one. Swords became legal to carry in public.
I want to get a sword, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, if you were an undercover Ninja Turtle, come on out, man.
I want to get a sword. Side note, one of my favorite shows is that Forged by Fire show. Have you seen it where they chop things and say it'll kill? I want a sword like that. That would just, during the apocalypse, I can just kind of drive around and just swing it out the window at zombies and stuff,
Or like, are you thinking like machete?
No, I'm thinking
or
like the long katana, like cuts through iron type like sword. All of it. Yes.
Japanese,
like it'll
Kill Bill
it'll
style.
Go right through your skull type of sword. Yeah. Okay. And dual, like that's got 2 on my back. I think you could do it. I think that would be the best, not only for like just asserting myself into a situation like, okay, we don't want to mess with this guy, but I've got one just in case my skills aren't quite there with one and it kind of falls out the window. I've got a second one,
I like this plan.
Just a backup plan.
I like this preparedness.
I am one to be prepared. So I think 2 swords would be better than 1. But so all these things are legal in Texas.
These things are legal now. And then in the last legislature, we got constitutional carry, which basically means that it's permitless carry.
Yeah.
So you don't have to have a license to carry anymore. Now, a lot of people are still getting one, huh?
Is that any firearm?
Yeah.
Or are there limitations on what you can carry?
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
And one thing I heard about, tell me if this is correct. Suppressors. You're allowed to have a suppressor now in Texas as long as it was made in Texas. That was a rumor I heard.
So let me clarify that.
Okay, please. Because I want one.
Because so when they passed that, I call that novelty legislation. Okay, much like when they passed campus carry in 2016, right?
Okay.
Yeah, you can carry on some campuses, but not many because the school boards were able to come in and restrict a lot of areas. So it was just here, shut up legislation, right?
Oh, yeah.
So let me clarify this suppressor stuff. What that means is that no Texas law enforcement agency is going to, if your suppressor was made in Texas with Texas parts, okay, so all of it has to be made in Texas.
Right, yeah.
And it stays in Texas.
Okay.
No Texas law enforcement agency is going to enforce anything upon you.
Okay.
You're still subject to federal law. And that's the problem. So if the feds got wind of it and wanted to come and take your ass to jail for it, they still can.
Okay. Bummer.
I know. And a lot. So I saw the explosion of comments and posts on social media when this came out. And this is the result of people that don't actually read the bill.
I'm guilty.
And understand what that means is insofar as, state versus federal. Okay. And
I'm guilty because I started making my own suppressor right away in my garage.
And you know what? I would personally classify that as low risk, because as long as it stays here and you don't try to take it to New York.
I'm not planning to kill anyone outside this state.
Okay.
As of right now.
I don't think that you're going to have really a problem.
Okay.
Just know.
Well, we're recording this just in case I do have a problem.
Yeah, but just know that you could still face issues with federal law enforcement.
The feds are always an issue, aren't they?
They are.
Always trying to get in our biz.
Always.
Down here in Texas.
I know.
Well, I tell you what, this has been a phenomenal time of hanging out with you. And I'm so thankful you stopped in. I'm encouraging any woman in my life to hit you up with some training. I know my wife's going to get something scheduled with you anyways. Do you primarily train at a specific place, or do you do house calls, or do you kind of move around from different ranges, or do you have kind of just a central hub where you work out of?
No, I train all over. I teach everywhere from here to Florida and from here to Nevada. I teach in Minnesota sometimes.
Wow.
And during COVID, when I was not busy for exactly 3 weeks. And then people started to figure out that this was kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
And, but the ranges weren't open yet. Like the retail stores were considered essential, the gun retail stores, but not the ranges. So I would actually go to people's houses and teach them in the dry fire method how to shoot. I was teaching people how to clean their guns, all the things that didn't require a live fire range.
Yeah.
I had a Mantis system. So I was teaching people on that. So sim guns, like you said.
See, this is what I want to do. I want to have you out to our house and kind of have us go over our kind of emergency standard procedures. This is what we have put in place. Let you look over it, make sure everything looks good there, tweak it as we need to, and get the kids kind of caught up on some stuff with you. I think that'd be really fun. My kids really enjoy it. My son's a way better shot than I am. He's great with a gun. He's just 10 years old, but mainly long guns. He's way better than me. But I would love to get all the kids involved. I mean, what's your opinion on before we wrap up here? What's your opinion on incorporating kids? Obviously, a certain age, of course, they need to be old enough to understand responsibility, but so that even that fluctuates with age. But what's your kind of stance on parents who really encourage the approach to firearms being more of a family approach?
I think that is the most responsible approach that parents can take. Understanding the maturity of their children, but also I think that a lot of maturity in children comes from how they're parented.
Yeah.
And I think that you mitigate a lot of risk in your family. If you're going to be a gun family, if you're a pro self-defense, pro 2A family, you mitigate a lot of risk by getting them educated as early as possible. A lot of the moms that train with me ask me how I would do it. And I tell them, you can teach trigger discipline and muzzle awareness to a 3-year-old with a Nerf gun. It's not hard. And if you're starting that young, by the time that child's 7-8 years old, you can put them behind a 22 bolt action and they're going to be fine. You've already taught them 2 of the 4 core safety rules right there at 3 years old with the Nerf gun. There has been a social study on this that has proven that parents who teach their kids about guns at an early age have significantly less accidents with firearms. They know what to do in situations where they aren't with their parents and a firearm comes into play. So the scenario that they did was they put these kids in a classroom. There was like 8 kids. 2 of them had a gun education. I think they were like 8 or 9 years old. The teacher that was in the room had a gun on her desk. It was fake, but it didn't look fake.
Right.
and that was by design. And she left it out intentionally on the desk, excused herself to go to the restroom. Well, kids don't stay in their chairs when the teacher's away, right? So all the kids get out, even the kids with the gun education, everybody gets out of their chairs, are running around playing. You know, one of the kids finds the gun on the desk and starts running around with it and pointing it at people and playing with it like it's a toy. And the two kids that had the gun education that had gone through like the Eddie Eagle style program, you know, that the NRA offers, they were the ones who left the classroom to go get a grown up.
Yeah.
They got a gun in there. Like our parents told us we can't do that. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And so, but all the rest of the kids were left at risk because they stayed in the room and they were playing with this thing that was a toy, but not supposed to be a toy.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And that was the whole,
they didn't know if it was a toy.
They didn't know. And that was the whole idea of the social study. And so you really do set your children up for success by teaching them this skill. So not only are they going to be able to effectively speak to this and effectively be able to defend themselves by the time that they're teenagers and you start leaving them home by themselves, because you know, you told me that this happens in your house, right?
Yeah.
But there's also byproducts to this education that's going to benefit them in other ways in their lives. And one of those, you know, a few of those byproducts are, you know, accountability. Yeah. And safety and responsibility.
Right. I mean, that's my opinion is if you've got a 12-year-old plus in your house who's mature, right? Who as mature as a 12-year-old's going to be, or even feels a little bit more mature, and the parents are going to be a good judge of that. If you've got a kid like that in your house that lives there, and they stay home alone, in my opinion, and you have guns, in my opinion, they need to know what they are, how they work, and how to use one.
Because the law allows for them.
Yeah.
Texas state law allows for them to be able to defend themselves in the home.
Again, going back to your argument, if someone comes to the house and you've got a fancy Ring doorbell or whatever that alerts you and all this stuff, and you feel like you have time to call somebody, the police ain't going to be there until what? I mean, at best, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on where you live. If you live in Dallas, probably 4 hours.
If they have someone to send you at all.
Right. And that's the thing is there's no guarantee someone's going to show up. And so you need to have some kind of plan. And it can't be, I want you to go hide in this closet and pretend like nobody's home. If you're going to hide in the closet, at least hide in there with the firearm. You know?
Yeah, that actually happened to a young girl in Oklahoma and she actually had to shoot somebody. That was actually the plan. And then another instance, I was dating a guy who had 2 teenage kids at one point, and he had taught them how to shoot, much to his ex-wife's dismay. Right. And he had given his ex-wife a .38 special. Right. And she didn't want it, but he was like, you need to take it anyway because it's the one that his daughter loved that gun. Right. I mean, his daughter's abnormally tall for her age, so 38 special was no issue. And so they had the gun. Well, that was the gun that she always wanted to practice with when she went with Brian to the range. And lo and behold, one night, she's home with her mom and someone tries to break in their house. They're watching movies in the living room. Some dude's trying to break in their garage. The mom calls the Fort Worth Police Department. They don't have anybody to send her. They told her that on the phone. Right. So the mom is literally crouched down behind the island in the kitchen on 911 crying because they have nobody to send her. And the daughter, I'm not going to say her name, but the daughter literally goes upstairs, loads up the .38 special, comes downstairs, takes the tactical position. We taught her all these things. Right. Takes the tactical position by the front door, and she turns to her mom. She's telling us this at brunch the next week when we take out for brunch. And she's like, and I told Mom, hey, if this guy comes through the door, I'm going to have to shoot him, and you need to be ready for that. Yeah. And he gave up. Thank God, right? Because I would never want my kid to be burdened with killing someone. No one ever wants that. But I'm so glad that she was prepared and ready to do it. And so the guy finally gives up. I think he was just like a homeless dude that was high, that was maybe trying to get in, find some shelter or something. He goes away. The Fort Worth Police Department doesn't show up till 2.5 hours later. Yeah. Brian's ex-wife was in a gun class the next week. Yeah. It was the most humbling thing for her. And this is what she told Brian. She said, it was the most horrible feeling in the world that my daughter was going to have to protect me and that I didn't know what to do. Yeah.
It's crazy. And that's my thing is, spoiler alert, if you're going to try to break in my house. So our plan is, that our kids, they know different scenarios. We talked about this not too long ago, but they all go to a certain closet, and I guess I'll leave that for you to find if you try to break in the house. But they'll be in a certain closet, and the 14-year-old will have an AR right at the door with the red dot on. So that way, if you open the door, all 30 are going to be gone, and you're going to probably looking like Swiss cheese. So it's kind of like, because she's pretty handy with it. She shoots it all the time. And again, I'm not putting my kids in situations that they're not prepared for.
Sure.
But it's like, hey, you all huddle in here. There's a light because the light shuts off as soon as you shut the closet door. And there's a little light in there. And then they're just huddled up in there. And then she's just got the gun at the door and it's ready to roll. And as soon as you come in, it's like, brrr, you're gone. So it's kind of like, that's one of our preparedness things. But I just feel like, man, if I'm going to leave my kids at home, like I don't want to even, the word you used, she used, I didn't want to, nobody wants the burden of their child. Nobody wants to grow up with the burden of having killed somebody, right? But also that mother and that daughter don't want their dad husband to grow up or to live the rest of his life with the burden of both of the women in his life is gone. Right. And so you got to pick the better burden to bear. Right. And neither one of them are fun, but one of them keeps you around, and it's one of those things that I just determined a long time ago that as soon as my children are showing an early enough maturity and a knowledge, a healthy responsibility and respect for firearms, then I want to teach them what they are and what they're used for and what they're not used for. Right. And that way that if I'm going to leave them home, it's my job, my responsibility to leave them prepared in my mind. Right. I feel like I'm doing them a huge disservice to say, hey, y'all stay home. We'll be home in a few hours. Call us if you need anything.
Exactly.
Because if I'm in Fort Worth and you call me, it's going to take me 40 minutes to get to you anyways.
100%. And women, wives, are doing their families and husbands a huge disservice by being annoyed that their husband wants them to get this education. Be brave. Mm-hmm. It's time to be brave, because we can't depend on our husbands and the men in our lives to be with us 24/7. We have a responsibility as mothers, grandmothers, aunts and sisters, etc., to protect the people around us. We have to stop being scared of this. Mm-hmm. Fear is not a productive emotion. It's not productive.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you really need to bite the bullet, pun intended, and get this done. You don't have to. It's your choice if you don't want to, but understand the position that you're putting yourself in terms of being able to protect your children and the people around you. The position that you're putting yourself in, sometimes husbands need a partner in this endeavor, right?
For sure,
I mean, this can't all lay on you. Mm-hmm. And it's unfair to do that. My
wife and I have made it kind of fun because we don't have a ton of things in common. We're just different folks, and we're different on a lot of different things. Where she's a homebody, I'm an extrovert, and just all these differences in hobbies. But we've made it a point to find a couple things that we both are interested in our lives, so that way it makes our marriage better, right? There's things that we can pursue together. And self-defense, firearms, preparedness is one of those things, thank God, because she's passionate about it. I am both. And so it's something fun for us to go, like a fun date night for us is to go to the range before dinner, right? So just to go and shoot for a while and then go out to dinner and then go have some drinks and go home. And so that's kind of a fun evening for us. And I think that that's one of the things that couples can do is to kind of make it fun for both of you and not make it such a male dominant thing to where, men can find ways, and it's almost like whiskey. Right. So whiskey is one of those things that's like, quote unquote, a male thing. Right. It always has been. And so one of the challenges for men is like, hey, how do I get my wife interested in whiskey? I get asked that all the time. Like, hey, how do I get my wife interested in whiskey? Well, my wife's not super interested in whiskey herself, but you got to find creative and fun ways to introduce them to it and to make it fun for them and to make it a good experience to where they don't wake up throwing up everywhere. But they wake up and saying, man, that was a good time, you know? And you can do the same thing with firearms, right? You can do same things with training is, take them to a range, make it fun for them and make it an enjoyable experience to where the next day they said, that was kind of fun, and then say, oh yeah, I got you this little cute little gun here. I got this pink 22, whatever. And they're like, oh, cool, and it's just making an enjoyable experience for them. And you can kind of build a bond over that. That's been key for me, at least. And so anyways, I wanted to thank you for dropping in because this was an amazing time. So much good stuff. I mean, we could keep talking for hours.
Oh, I know. So, you baited me with bourbon, so I immediately said yes.
Bourbon and guns, I'm there. So, you were the perfect guest tonight. So thank you for stopping in. Cheers to everything you're doing to empower the women of the world to be more prepared, just more badass overall. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks. And I'd love to come back in a few months because I got some other business ventures that I'm doing that I think would really, I think a lot of your viewers would enjoy. And so maybe in a 4 or 5 months when they're all built out, and I'm ready to get people
Let's do it. One of those being your restaurant that you're like the Mercury Chop House, which I've already started looking at reservations, by the way.
Oh, good.
So I'm thinking about Valentine's Day. I want to see if there's anything open, but
we might as well get that done today.
So let's get it done today
in
because
a few days there's not going to be anything left.
I want to get that on the books. So thank you again, Jerah Hutchins in the studio. Gosh, you're so cool. Just a cool friend. So thank you for dropping in. Excited about some training and stuff coming up. So awesome.
Awesome. Cheers again.
Yeah.